Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. So excited to have you here today to listen to a nurse's story. We just had a bit of technical difficulties here, disconnected, and I'm just waiting for Ashleigh Elmore to join us. So she should be popping in any moment here. Let me introduce you to who Ashleigh is. She is a 39-year-old Christian mother of two daughters, ages 7 and 10, and she's born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, and she's now in a small town called Boston with her husband of 13 years. She has a master's of science and a bachelor's of science in nursing and has been practicing in critical care at the University of Louisville for the past 15 years. She's been in the critical care unit at the University of Louisville. In the last decade, she's been working as an acute care nurse practitioner in the intensive care units at Jewish Hospital. And as she was telling me that she, after the pandemic, and that's one of the reasons I brought her onto the show to talk to us, is after the pandemic, she identified that she was experiencing nursing burnout and was approaching a crossroads in her career. At one time, she thought that she may leave the healthcare system altogether. She thought, is really nursing for me? And she knew she still had a passion with a purpose, a vision, a mission, and a vocation to nursing. But through her own personal health struggles, which worsened during the pandemic, and she'll talk to us about that, she connected with functional medicine. A very interesting journey for this nurse. So, do I still want to be a nurse and connecting with functional medicine? She thankfully embarked on an ongoing journey seeking optimal health through a functional medicine integrative approach. And she thankfully embarked on and then she had a sense of excitement for obtaining balance and wellness and went to help others find this as well. So she completed the Integrative Nurse Coaching Academy Functional Medicine Certificate program. That's a mouthful, isn't it? I'll just say that again. The Integrative Nurse Coaching Academy Functional Medicine Certificate program in Louisville, and has begun a mentorship with Kim Evans that we've talked about before. Kim Evans has written a book and she has an integrative clinic. And so Ashleigh has joined her there and is doing a mentorship and plans to join her in the practice of integrative medicine. And Ashleigh's just joined us now. So let me just complete your introduction, Ashleigh. We were just saying that we had some technical difficulties here. Now, pursuing to be a board certified nurse coach, she is completing her program in July, and she'll tell us a little bit more about what a nurse coach does and what her dream is as a nurse coach, and how she may be even proposing that to the hospital that she's working at. So without further ado, thank you, Ashleigh, for being here. I'm really excited about having you on board and telling us, the week of the nurse, like happy Nurses Week to everybody and to you, Ashleigh.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Yeah.
Yes, same to all the nurses out there.
Thank
Happy
you.
Nurses Week. Thank you for the warm welcome as well.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of history here and a lot to talk about. And maybe we can start with, the part where, you've worked in ICU, which maybe you could talk a little bit about the intensity, the overwhelm in working in a unit like that, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. I've always been in critical care, but it has changed a lot over the years, especially as we went into 2020 with the pandemic. And even in the hospital of which I work, it had changed hands, changed leadership and ownership over the course of time. So so a lot had changed, and then here we were hit with the pandemic, and it really was just an awakening.
In what way?
It seemed that we weren't, we thought we were prepared for for the care of our community in any level, and then we realized soon that we weren't, and not just in the capacity, because our hospital really didn't become overflow where we had patients out in the tent areas. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
But I think just the capacity of which our providers could perform at their best and feel comfortable and supported and informed. So in the ICU, in my advanced practice role, I I collaborate with the physicians. We're
Mhm.
a team. I do
Yep.
much of what the physicians do as far as seeing the patients and looking at all the objectives and examining them and coming up with assessment and treatment plans and doing procedures, and including putting people on the ventilator and invasive procedures, central lines, A lines, all of those sorts of things.
Mhm.
And I've done that over the years. That became a little bit more difficult during the pandemic, because of all of the PPE and the concerns, and wearing the PAPRs and trying to limit people in and out of the rooms,
Yeah.
and not people not coming in the units, unnecessarily. And a lot of that was, I guess, fear driven and the unknown.
Mm.
But it really kind of shook us up. Um,
Yeah.
I remember being in when this very began, going to the floor from, I'm in the ICU primarily, but sometimes they would call us to go to the floor patients to assess someone. And I was called to do that on a patient with COVID. And at that time during the pandemic, we were doing early intubations, when someone
Mhm.
had an oxygen demand that went up from, say 2 liters to 6 liters, we
Yep.
were quickly moving them to the unit and going ahead and putting them on the ventilator because we thought that was best. As time went on, we realized that wasn't the best, and we would wait to the very last potential opportunity, when we had to put them on the ventilator. But I just remember at that time going to that nurse's wing, and and the nurses just had these blank expressions, faces, just this look of like, what is happening? What are we doing? What should we do? There
Yep.
was just so many questions and so much uncertainty. And of course, I didn't know much. I knew my colleagues, my attendings were working on protocols with the administration to, what do we do as far as, the basic things, as far as this
Yep.
isolation, the transport, how do we get these patients cared for? And of course, then
Mm.
we had the families that were just, not able to be there, and and probably in a hospital system where communication was already not at its best, and then here we were challenged with this,
Right.
but I just remember sitting with the nurses and just kind of being the center of attention for that moment, and trying to help just give them some sense of peace, and
Mm.
even just reassurance that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're doing this right, but we're in this together, so let's just try to be together, and do our best. And
Yeah.
reflection on that time, I think, gosh, how great would it have been if I would have been a nurse coach then?
Right, right, which we'll talk about. You're pursuing that. Yeah, so it's really interesting when I asked you, I don't remember the exact question I asked you, but you went directly to, not knowing what to do for the patients, or they didn't know, the organization did not know what to do for the patients. And my thought was, did they know what to do for the nurses? Right?
Right.
Um, like we quickly, our instinct as nurses is to quickly go to the patient, which, I mean, that's what we're there for, right? But
Mhm,
where I think we fail is how are we there for the nurses?
mhm,
And when you talk about, an organization revamping and, new directors and new management, that seems to be the pattern that we've lived in. And I think probably from exhaustion that people just move on and go on. And what happens is we always start thinking from the top down. And so therefore the nurses are left last,
mhm,
which needs to change,
mhm,
and I think that that's where we're heading today. I think the gift of the pandemic, if we're going to say, what, in bad things, what is the gift? It's the gift that it woke us up and said, we're important too.
mhm,
As nurses, we are important too. Yeah, so what a journey. And I could see that the natural ability to just start coaching and be there with the nurses to calm them down in the moment, because they were functioning as you were, as all of us were
mhm,
functioning from fear,
mhm,
right? Many
mhm,
people are functioning from fear, and when we're in fear, we don't think logically sometimes, or we don't think, maybe not even logically is the word I'm looking for, more heartfelt,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
More humanly than
Mhm,
just the logic of rules and guidelines, which at that point were all broken and changed,
mhm.
right? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. What a
absolutely.
journey. But then, so tell us a little bit about what happened after that, how far into the pandemic that you started to feel experiencing some um, health issues for yourself. What was
Okay.
that?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of that really stemmed from just from 2020 all the way through the year and into 2021, just living in that kind of that basal rate of fight or flight, where
Hmm.
that stress response it always was there on some level. It's definitely in the hospital, and then when I
Yeah.
came home, there was still probably some of that. And I wasn't as aware of my own body, mind, and spirit, at that
Mm.
time to, I think, really intervene early. So a lot of time passed, and I was working in the hospital a couple days a week, and then coming home to the changes in the family dynamic with schools and such, because I do have two children. But
Yeah.
um, it really, I think, started to break me down,
Yeah.
just on the inside, just as stress would do to any of us over time. And I started experiencing, to me, I think, what was just like exhaustion, fatigue, probably a lot of that kind of adrenal response of just the adrenals wearing out. Which I only have one adrenal because I only was born with one kidney.
Oh my word.
But it's
Okay.
fine. But I just make that connection because I think I had an adrenal exhaustion fatigue,
Yeah.
and that was, I think, also being worsened by just the lack of care for my nutrition. I feel like I
Right.
remember in the beginning of the pandemic just going out and just buying a bunch of, you know, processed foods just
Yeah.
because so we would have something, just to fill our cabinets, and I partaked in eating that. And I think all of that really just disrupted my gut microbiome, and that really over time, I think, really disrupted my neurotransmitters, and really
Hmm.
left me feeling anxiety and hormonal disruptions,
Mm.
and like a borderline, depression, just
Yeah.
kind of just down. And then I ended up with some physical pain. It may have been from a fall I took just where I was doing yard work and fell and hit my sacrum. May have been from
Mm.
that. I'm not sure. But regardless, that left me with like some sciatica and some discomforts,
Mm.
which really just added to all the rest. It was just, I
Yeah.
just felt like I was breaking down. And in the midst of all of that, just wondering, you know, where am I going and how am I going to get out of this mess? you
Right,
know?
right. And it's funny how I think the universe just serves us, with that fall. It was kind of like a message to you that says, slow down, girl.
Yes.
Like if we don't listen to our body, then the greater forces have a message for us. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I'm curious. I want to kind of slow down that process because we can quickly talk about that, and it's familiar to people. But I just want to go really slow down that process and say, what was going on through your head? Like, what were the words that you were saying to yourself?
Yeah, I think when I thought about my career, my profession, as a nurse practitioner in the ICU, I thought, um, I felt kind of hopeless. I think, not really feeling like I was making a difference anymore in my
Um,
patients'
mhm,
um, lives. Maybe it was because I was also being required to see more patients, and our patient load pretty much doubled, and the time just wasn't there, and then
mm,
the duties were more, and the expectation. So I wasn't able to give, I think, what I wanted to give, and I just saw this as a process, of patients coming in. They were so sick, so as far as my profession, I was feeling kind of hopeless and feeling like I just wasn't making a difference anymore in that
right.
setting. And I thought,
Mm,
I just don't know if this is for me. Um,
mm,
at that point, I thought I might, get out of healthcare altogether. I just thought there might be something totally different I needed to shift into.
yes.
Um, and maybe that was enhanced by some of the other physical things I was going through too, that were making me not feel like, alive again, and present, and that I was really truly making a difference. I just wasn't seeing that.
Yeah, I kind of visualize almost, those cartoons where the deer is running, but he's still running on the same spot. You know,
Hmm.
it's like
Yeah.
that place where you're just going, 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 but you're not really moving forward. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, so there's that chaos. But I really, going back to the emotions, it's really interesting because I talk about the iceberg concept. I just kind of want to bring this in. I haven't talked about this on my live streams, but the iceberg concept is really, what do we observe? So the external world, our colleagues, even our families, and everybody just observes when we're, the results and the behaviors. So we're looking at bullying, which can happen. We're looking at performance. We're looking at toxic behaviors, stress, overwhelm, illness. But what we're not paying attention to, which I think is really important, is what's below the iceberg. So you imagine the iceberg, you see the outside, that's what we see. Underneath, there's still a huge amount of ice under in the water. And that's the invisible part. That's our emotions, our thoughts, and our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at anxiety, loneliness, cultural tensions, even at that time that just, escalate, the overwhelm in its own way, depression, burnout, minimal coping skills, lack of focus and direction, self-judgment, low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, self-doubt, fear, helplessness, and ultimately, at the very bottom, I call it failure. Like we feel like we're failing,
Mm-hmm.
and imagine that, and imagine I know you can remember that place where all of that is buried deep inside of us, and we're trying to survive with our head just above water in that iceberg of of the way we have to cope.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we don't know how to cope because we've never been in this situation before.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You're right. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
does that sound familiar when I talk about it that way?
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are just, what we're doing in healthcare typically is that we're dealing with the symptoms that are showing on the top of the iceberg, and we're not dealing with any underlying issues.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're right.
So let's kind of journey into your journey there, because you talked about that, where what was the next step after all of this? How did you get out of this? How do you, like, do I even want to be here? What was your next thought?
Well, yeah. So, my thought was that I've got to keep doing this job, because for me at that time, I thought, well, this is all I know. Of course, as a nurse, I knew a lot of other aspects of love and care for humans, and how to embrace that. But I didn't realize it then. At that time, I thought, well, I don't know anything else. I've got to just keep doing this. I need, financial security and support my family.
Yeah.
And so I just sat with that, and I had a good spiritual foundation, and so that is, I think, what kept me from sinking any further.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for my growth in that before COVID. But I think I started to realize I've got to deal with my own health, and so I did try to seek out, some evaluation from my physicians, my nurse practitioners, to try to discuss my mental health and my hormonal balance and my physical pain. So that led me, to being offered an antidepressant and some Flexeril, some medications to treat my symptoms, as you were saying.
Yeah,
And
to treat the observable, right?
right, and at that time I thought, well, okay, I will get down with this for a short time, but I know this is not where I'm going. This is not what I want for myself. But that was all I was being offered,
Yeah.
and so I took what I needed at the time and started to take baby steps and started to go to physical therapy, and which was more of just a conventional type physical therapy, and certainly all that did help, to some degree. It definitely was part of my process, but I think it wasn't ultimately what I needed to really start to find restoration of my health. But it gave me hope, even that little bit, of connection with my providers and what they could offer me in my, my treatment plan. It did give me a little hope, which I think generated some energy, and I feel like everything happens for a reason, and after moving through that process and really not getting that, the feeling that I was getting well, I sought out a different physical therapy, because the physical part was really important to me. It was limiting my activities, and I think that was impacting my mental health further. So I went and saw a neurokinetic physical therapist, who I'd heard advertised on one of the spiritual radio stations, and it just felt like a calling. I'm like, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to go and check it out, and see what the next step might be for me. And that's really where things started to change, I think, with me, because I connected with with the provider. Her name is Karen Scott. She has
Hmm.
a practice in Louisville, and she just approached me differently. She was a spiritual woman who was trying to help me to connect my mind to my body, and to do
Mm-hmm.
so with a different technique. And we became friends, and which was great. And then she was able to get me on a little different treatment plan, and introduce me to what is functional medicine. And I
Hmm.
had never heard of that before. Even
Hmm.
being a nurse for 15 years, I guess I didn't get out much, and outside of the critical care setting in
Oh.
the hospital, I didn't know what functional medicine was. But when I started to learn about what that was, what that meant trying to take a different approach to look at how the body interacts together, and try and get to the root cause of all the symptoms. I
Mm.
just really, that resonated with me, and I was like, okay, like this is exciting. And
Yeah.
so that really sparked my my spirit and my energy again. I think, for okay, I love this, and I want to learn more about this and how I can incorporate this into my own health, and maybe this is what I'm supposed to do with my the rest of my career as a nurse. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it was really liberating to know that there was something else. It really opened my
Well,
eyes.
I think it touched into the human aspect of being seen, heard, and acknowledged on a very different level
Mhm.
versus it appears to me by having spoken to you before and today, it's really that piece of I'm not just a bunch of symptoms. I'm
Yes.
not just a bunch of things that you're trying to fix. I'm a human being here, and you're not looking at me as a whole person.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I think that's what was missing. That's what was
Mm,
missing all along,
mm,
and is
yeah.
still missing. I think in our healthcare system, the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're very focused on disease care. We're
Mm.
not focused on health care, right?
Yes.
So um, I'm curious just to bring it into a little bit of a different angle here. What would you say to a nurse today who is going through what you've been through? How would you approach her as a nurse coach, or you know, what would be the first words of wisdom out of your mouth for her or him?
Yeah. That's a good one. I think, as far as words of wisdom, is would be to trust in your body to
Mm,
take care of itself,
mm,
because
mm-hmm,
I truly believe that. I believe that our
mm-hmm.
bodies can heal themselves given the right ingredients,
Right.
from food and clean environment and healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm,
just feel like sometimes we forget that our bodies are amazing, and
mm-hmm.
and take care of, they can take care of what's going on if we just support them. And
Right.
so I think trust in yourself would be
Mm-hmm.
my
Yeah,
strongest
there's
word.
something about trusting yourself instead of always listening to everybody else that, you, well, we've always said that, right? We thought the physicians were the gods and they had all the answers and they don't. I mean, they're human beings like we are and they learn a hell of a lot in their studies, but how can they know it all? And what they've learned in school is very different from what's evolving in our world today about paying more attention to our body and listening to that. So
Yes.
yeah, that's fabulous. And so that took you on a different journey. So once you started looking after your health, and I bet your family was relieved as well because of the responsibility of children. And maybe let's just pause there before we go into the next step. Were you impacted by your children not being able to go to school because of COVID?
I was, yes. Because they were doing homeschool,
Yeah.
so that did
Oh,
create, well, because we were doing that NTI, they called it, which is the
okay.
virtual learning.
Yeah.
And so I was impacted in the sense that I did have an additional responsibility to oversee them and their schoolwork. And
Yeah.
um, at
And
that time,
how did the healthcare system help you with that? Because there were a lot of nurses, who are parents and having to deal with the extra burden of or responsibility, maybe not burden, but the responsibility of our families. How did you manage that?
I mean, not well. The hospital didn't support us. I don't recall feeling any support, from them, and either teaching us coping strategies, or how to try to balance our family and work. Thankfully, I was and am still in a part-time basis, so for
Mm,
me that was good because I was only obligated 2 days a week. So
Right.
so that did free me up more time, and I have a very supportive husband and family. So together we were able to do it, but it definitely was an added stressor
Yeah. Yeah.
to
And it's
have
not
to.
everybody's circumstances, right? What about all those full-time nurses that are working and have, children, or can be single moms or single dads? Yeah,
Mhm.
it's really yeah, so that's a struggle. So let's kind of go
Yeah.
into the journey now. Where did that take you?
So that took me to finding the Integrative Nurse Coaching Academy,
Mhm.
and have, they offered a functional medicine certificate class,
Mhm.
and so I enrolled in that last fall, or maybe it was summer actually when I enrolled in it, and it was led by a brilliant nurse practitioner, Bridget Seeger, and she was very just energetic, and she, it was all virtual, but she taught these lectures, and we read and really just dove into learning how to understand the body from a functional medicine perspective,
Mm.
and how to look at all of digestion and communication of hormones, and really just the gut health, and everything at a functional level. And
Yeah.
as I learned that, I was able to start applying that in baby steps into my own life. As I gained this knowledge, okay, I was modifying what I'm eating, and eliminating a lot of the toxins, and just really kind of going through everything I could in my
Yeah.
life to try to restore things, and to do so, with the hope to trying to eliminate those symptoms, and to try to start feeling better.
Mhm.
And I just loved everything about the course, and I just think it was life changing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got the integrative medicine, you've got the nurse coach, and then you're doing a mentorship with Kim Evans.
I am, yes.
Okay.
Um,
So yeah.
so I'll touch a little bit on the nurse coach if you want first, or I can touch on the
Oh,
Kim.
whatever you think your journey
Okay,
takes you to, I'll let
yeah,
you
because
lead the role here.
well, my journey, actually, probably me learning of Kim actually came from that neurokinetic physical therapist that I was seeing. She is the one who said, "Hey, there's a lady in town named Kim Evans, and she has been doing integrative medicine for years. You should look into meeting her." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds like something that would be good for me." And so I did. I looked up Kim and read a little bit about her bio, and I thought, I felt immediate connection to her because her background and story was much of the same as what I was journeying through, being a
Mm,
critical care nurse, experiencing burnout and compassion fatigue, and realizing there was a different way to provide health care and to try to really help meet people where they are and to try to get them well. So I really just resonated with her thoughts, and she did a lot of just inspirational speaking, and I thought, okay, I'm going to meet her one day, or I hoped anyways that if I could meet her one day, that would be like my dream come true, and that she would, if she would invite me to be mentored by her, like that
yeah.
would just set me off in the direction where I needed to go.
Yeah.
Um, and so anyhow, I did reach out to her last year, and there was a brief exchange of conversation, but then it didn't go anywhere. But it's okay because I don't think it was meant to at that time.
Mhm.
Um, but in the back of my mind, I still hung on to that potential dream, and during that time, I came into connection with nurse coaching, and this course was also offered through INCA, which is the Integrative Nurse Coaching Academy, where I took the functional medicine certification. And I thought, gosh, at first I thought, well, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for 15 years. I'm already a coach. Why
Yep.
would I take this class?
I know
And
that. Yeah.
then that was my initial thought, which was probably ignorant. But anyways, I got to listening to this podcast that one of the nurses puts on called Integrative Nurse Coaches in Action. And it's led by Nicole Vianu, and she's just a really energetic woman, nurse coach, who has a passion for health and healing. And so listening to the podcast, she would interview other nurse coaches, and there was just a lot of good conversation going on, and just the energy and what they said and how they listened and how they asked questions and how they supported one another. It was just beautiful. And I thought, okay, I'm going to accept it. I'm not a nurse coach. The way that they are is really magnificent. And I didn't really feel that I embraced all of those good qualities or characteristics, but I realized that I want to be able to do and to listen and to be with someone and, and be mindful and I wanted to learn. So I changed my mind and,
Yeah.
and I went ahead and decided, okay, I'm going to sign up for this nurse coaching class and see. I feel like that was going to be the foundation for my next step, because I think to be a good provider and to be the kind of provider that I liked being and wanted to be and wasn't able to be in the hospital, was one that can actually sit with your patient, listen, and really try to meet them where they are, find out what's important to them, find out what their struggles are, and so I realized that, okay, I'm going to be able to become a nurse coach, and I'm going to utilize all of this greatness in my own personal life as a mother, as a wife, and as a nurse. And I just knew it would really kind of come full circle in
Yeah.
how what I was learning, how I could use this in my everyday life. And I
Yeah.
thought it would just change me. And so that's what I decided to commit to becoming a nurse coach. And now I'm into the second part of that, which is the
Yeah.
practical one, where I'm actually doing some coaching.
Right.
But the first part of that course was really about learning about being, a nurse coach and what that meant, and
Uh,
how to
About you.
yes, it's about you. Yeah, it's about doing that health assessment on yourself
Yeah.
and looking at that with and realizing, how what you need to discover about your own self to work
Yeah.
on things to
Yeah.
get yourself better. So that self-awareness, self-discovery piece was huge and fun. So I got to be coached and coach some of my peers, and that's kind of how that relationship worked. And it
Yeah.
was really good. I enjoyed it. And
Yeah, I just love when I'm hearing there's even in the whole story there's a sudden transition that's going on. It's at the very beginning even talking about, what are we doing for the patients? The patients aren't getting what they need. And what you've done is you've now switched it over to who am I? How can I show up? What's the best version of myself? And now you're filtering it into the patient care. Now it's
mhm,
about how do I show up for the patient?
mhm.
Wow, I mean, just look at that. If you slow motion that,
Yeah.
I'm looking at a slow movie, with the, um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's actually very beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you. And I've, part of being coached myself, I was explaining and sharing my struggles with what I do for work and and the demand and how I just felt like I wasn't able to make a difference.
yeah,
Yes, some people are getting well and we're transitioning them out of the hospital or home. Some patients it's their time to go be with the good Lord, and we have to help them transition into to peace and eternal life. But
yeah,
I still was struggling even with that. And so as part of being coached myself, my coach, my peer, she helped lead me through a conversation, and it led to a beautiful, it ended up being a goal for myself and something I could do different. And it's really made a big difference. And what that was that each day when I went to work, I might have 8 or 12 ICU patients.
wow.
Um, but I would pick one of them, and, one of them who could communicate with me,
Hmm.
and I would connect with them, on an intimate level, and 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 see what they needed, see what they were
Mm,
thinking, connect with
mm,
their heart and mind, and see what it was that their goal was for themselves for the day, or what
mm,
is it that I could do to help them. And
mm.
and through a conversation, and a little just kind of coaching, that would lead to something, and I'm not sure if anyone else asked them what they had in mind as a goal for themselves for that day,
Yeah,
but it's really led to some beautiful experiences. I've and simple things. It's really just the simple things that have
yeah,
really brought me back joy,
yeah,
And one of them being one of my patients wanted to have a cup of tea, so what did we do? We had a cup of tea. I
Right.
made that time. I
Yeah.
took her a cup, shared a conversation, and just that was just so impactful for her and me. And then
Mm,
another example was a lady who had previous lung transplant that was failing, and so she was on chronically on the vent now, and just dealt with breathlessness and anxiety, and as you can imagine,
sure.
um, and so for her, we talked about breathing, and she was open to me doing like a mindfulness practice with her, and so I took
Mm,
15 minutes out of the day, and I sat with her, and we did a mindfulness, and I could just see her transform into a state of relaxation,
mm,
and her breathing slow, and
yeah.
and so it's those are the little things that now I'm finding that I'm doing, and it might just be one person I can connect with like that, but
Mm,
that's making a difference for me, I think, in my perception of the love and care I'm delivering, and also impacting the patient, I think, probably in a greater way than all the other things we're doing to them. It's like we
yeah.
forget to ask, what do they need? We do all these things to people, and we don't ask them, what we can really do for them, or what do
Right.
they want to do.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, you're
So,
pointing directly to what I just did a workshop for 20 operational managers, nurse managers in South Africa a few weeks back. And I was telling them, instead of, I mean, we all need to work on the big solution, which is part of how we met through Nurses Transforming Healthcare.org.
mhm,
And that's important. But on a daily basis, for our own sanity, for our own well-being, and for the things that bring us back to the human touch, is celebrating the little things, celebrating that one patient that you had the connection with for today, celebrating that one moment you have with your child, whatever it is. Those are small wins. Celebrating the moment that you took to just go to the washroom, take a
mhm,
breath. Like, those are all little wins that we don't focus enough on. We're always waiting for the big things. It's like, why is it always got to be big?
mhm.
It's
Yeah.
small. And I love your story about the tea. I just think about it in my nursing years, at the bedside. Um, it was probably about, I'm gonna say, a good 25 years ago. Okay. I mean, we were not in the chaos that we are in today, but we were in that place of, nurse shortages still, and complaining, and a lot of, bitterness and overwhelm and all that. And I remember this one little lady, old lady, who was, one of my patients, and I asked her what I could do for her,
Mhm,
right? Not to her, but
mhm,
what I
right.
could do for her. And she wanted a cup of tea. So I went and made a cup of tea. And I got my head blasted off by another nurse saying, "Why are you doing that? We don't have time for that. You're not here tomorrow, and she's going to expect a cup of tea from us tomorrow." And I was like, I looked at her and I went, "Well, what is nursing care?
Right.
If not making a cup of tea for a patient, isn't that part of it?"
Mhm,
I've been to I was coaching a nurse manager at one point where they they had a unit for Alzheimer patients, and they found that a lot of patients, to calm them down, they were giving them sleeping pills, and all different drugs to calm them down in different ways. And what they did was they created a dining room with the white tablecloths and fine china, and when somebody got agitated, they would put some music on and get up and dance with them, like. And the drug level, the need for drugs was lowered just by giving simple human connection.
mhm. Oh, yes.
So yeah, yeah, and I hear nurses say we don't have the time. But what I've discovered over the years is when you take the time, you actually save time.
Mhm,
With agitation, in patients complaining, ringing the bell, if you
mhm,
sit down and talk to your patient and say, "This is what my day looks like. What does your day look like? Let's see how we can work together." And the bell calling is reduced,
mhm.
because they're
Yeah.
not in fear. They're not looking for attention.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
I believe
yeah,
that. Yes. Yeah, we
yeah.
need more. We need more of that human connection. I think that's why we all got into nursing. It's just somehow
It's
things have
lost.
changed. Yeah.
Yeah, and there
Yeah.
are things to do, and at the end of the day, remember the days when I remember the days when everybody gets a bed bath, and or, well, maybe Why are we so stuck in the old ways that everybody has to get washed every day in the same way and it's always morning? Some
Mhm.
people, why don't we give it on the evening shift sometimes? Why don't we do a night shift when this patient's awake and, restless or whatever? Like, there are rules that I think we have
Mhm.
to stop, being in these boxes and
Mhm.
just look at it and go, what makes sense on a
Mhm.
human level?
Yeah. Yeah, you got a good point.
And I come first, because if I
Right.
don't put my oxygen mask on first, I'm of no service to my patients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so
Yeah.
true. And I feel like
Yeah.
nurses' health has really declined. I was a prime example of that, and I've seen it in my colleagues and in the nurses. A lot of them had left the healthcare system. We have pretty much a whole new, cohort of nurses. There's a few who have been there for years, but I mean, majority of them are newer over the past couple years.
Yeah.
And I just see the health of nurses. Just the self care piece is missing. I feel like that.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of in communication. I just hear people, just venting their stressors and their, um, and I hear a conversation about, there's a lot more people on medications, I think
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
for anxiety, for example, or
Yeah.
I hear them talking about the use of alcohol and,
Substance
all of,
abuse.
and yeah, substance abuse. And it's like there's a cry going out. I hear it
Mhm.
just in circulating in the units when I'm there seeing my patients, and
Yeah,
so
and
it's
what you're pointing to is the fact that they're caught in this whirlwind of overwhelm, and just chaos. And there's no clarity on how to move forward. They're surviving, they're not thriving, right?
mhm,
They're in this place of
yeah,
survival and they don't know how. And
mhm,
what better than having a partner on your journey as a nurse
mhm,
coach, as a coach, to slow you down and say, okay, um, let's take a look at this together. I'm holding your hand. You're not alone,
mhm,
to have that partnership to somebody who cares. And it's amazing when, I mean, I just coached somebody recently who was in depressive state and needed to take time off work. I mean, it was
mhm,
at that point. And she was like, okay, but what do I do? What else can I do than nursing? Or if I go back, and I went, whoa, you've got to slow down and just do self-care 101.
mhm,
Are you eating other things than processed food, right?
mhm,
Are you drinking your water? Are you doing your breath work? Are
mhm,
you quietening the mind? Like, are you doing all those basic human needs
mhm,
prior to even thinking about how do I show up in the world?
mhm.
You gotta show up for you.
Right.
And they need somebody to hold their hand to slow them down a little bit and not get caught up in the big life issue.
Mhm. Oh, certainly. Yes. Yes, I completely agree. I
Mm,
completely agree, and I think that's why, for me, it feels important, to present to my administration about that opportunity of hiring me or maybe more nurse coaches to help support our nurses,
yeah,
um, and to see how we can't maybe start a new model, or to help transform our nurses into better versions of themselves, through self-care and teaching and helping to coach them,
right.
um, in
Well,
their own lives.
our whole model has to change. I mean, is it occupational health where, when somebody takes time off and they've got to report back to occupational health and say when they're ready to come back to work? Well, I worked with an operational health team, and it was all focused on the profession of the job and what do you need to get back on the floor. And when I went in there and started coaching, and I did it with somebody who was from occupational health in the room to show them how we do the coaching, um, this person was just almost fell off her chair and just said, wow, you're looking at her whole life. You're looking at her whole feelings and beings and, below the iceberg, right?
Mhm,
Below
mhm,
the water surface, the iceberg on the bottom. And she was just like, wow, this is really what they need, more so than, the discipline of coming back to work and, taking time off for mental health days and stuff like that. You've already had so many, or Like, what's going on below this? Like,
Mhm.
we're not addressing that. And we're
Right.
thinking we're just going to put a Band-Aid on it and let it continue.
Mhm.
You know, it doesn't
Yeah,
work.
it doesn't.
Doesn't work.
No.
So where are you heading now? Who's the Ashleigh of today?
Yeah. Well, pursuing finishing my nurse coaching and seeing if there's a place for that in the hospital system. I
Mhm.
feel like that if I'm going to stay in the healthcare system, it's got to be in some kind of avenue like that. And so that's why it's important. And I've started that process of connecting with my collaborating physician and writing a letter. I haven't yet presented it to our administration, but I'm moving in that direction to see if there is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's important to me. And then since then, I did connect back with Kim Evans, and so that is a new journey that started up, and the timing was good. She said, my dream is to train 10 or 20 nurse practitioners to do integrative
Mm,
medicine, and I would love for you to be in the first group of them. And so she invited me to come and start
that's
doing some
fabulous.
training with her. And so I've begun that process,
Yeah.
and plan to, once trained, to actually, you know, join her practice and seeing my own patients.
Right.
So that's exciting. It's my dream kind of taking place in the
Yeah.
right time here. And
Well, tell me your perspective on this, Ashleigh, because over the years, when I was working with nurses previously, I think things are changing a little bit, but uh, I felt that nurses in general, and I'm making a very general statement here, um, were not wanting to invest in themselves, that they expected the healthcare system to look after them. My big question is, how's that working for you?
yeah.
Right? Not
Yeah.
working for you, right? And for
Mhm.
years and years and years and years, nurses are always like, they owe us, they need to do this. So we started to create programs, from my company, from Alive in Healthcare, started to create programs in hospitals. And then it's the complaint of, yeah, they're just doing these programs because it makes them look good and they think they're doing something for us, but they're not. It's all about them. And I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, there's a lot of bitterness. There's a lot of, and I'm thinking, when do nurses take the responsibility, as many other professionals who are not in healthcare do, to do their own personal growth, as you stepped into doing,
Mhm.
taking well, you went through your own journey personally that took you there, but there's this place of saying, what can I do differently? How can I look after myself? Because if you
Mhm.
waited for the hospital to look after you, you'd still be in the
Right.
same boat or worse,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
what do you think the message is to nurses about, taking responsibility for themselves?
Yeah, I think I've found myself in several conversations in the past 3 to 5 months, probably, in the unit with nurses, because I think they've seen maybe a transformation in me and in the way I
Oh,
speak and
nice.
share and
Yeah.
connect with with them and families and patients. So I think that in that I've drawn in a few nurses, and in conversation, they inquire, well, what are you doing? So there is that interest, that light bulb that's kind of going off, that they're questioning, what are you doing? So I've had conversations about the importance of self-care, and for me, a lot of it boils down to the foundations is the sleep and the nutrition and the hydration. So majority of conversation is around that.
Mm,
So I'm starting to see more nurses want to talk about things.
mm,
um, but on the flip side, when it comes to what I hear nurses saying they want from the hospital, it's money, and they just want to be paid more. And so I don't know, it's, to me, that's a struggle, because um it's not about money, obviously. That money's not going to fix
well,
your health.
I think the money part is about, we're not valued and recognized. I think that's
That's
the
it.
human basis, right?
Yeah.
So we want to be valued and valued, but acknowledged, seen. However, that's not going to fix the problems that you're demonstrating in your own body,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Right.
great, we're going to give you more money. Is that going to change anything?
No.
Sure, you get more money.
Yeah.
And what do you do with that money?
Mhm.
Drink it away? Substance, or put it in a bank account because you don't have the energy to spend it on things that you want to do for yourself. Like, that's not the solution.
Mhm. Right.
and
Yeah.
and one of the things I've created is, I've got this group called Join the Movement Nurses Reclaim Life. That's on my website for anybody who's interested, and it's bringing nurses together, globally. I mean, there's 3 calls a week that you can become part of. Come in and you talk about your wins. You talk about the small things you want to celebrate on these calls, and when you're
Mhm.
struggling, the group, all of us, and I lead the calls, are there to support you and say, have you tried this? Or what if here's what, more than suggesting, it's that place of saying, here's what I did.
Mhm.
Is that something you would want to try and take on?
Mhm.
And just start with the small things and see how that changes. I can't tell you, like, if I had to rewind, go back to where I started too. It's that place of when I started to just breathe and drink water. It was like, wow.
Oh. Yeah.
Wow.
Makes a difference, don't it?
Oh, my mind. You know what it is? It changed it took the fog out of my brain.
Mhm.
Like, we're
Yeah.
talking like simple little things that you think, oh, it's not going
Mhm.
to make a difference if I don't do my breathing right now, or if I don't drink my water. Oh, yes, it does.
Mhm. Yes. Yes, it does. You are so
It,
right.
yeah. And if we could just help people just see that, and not be alone to do that, to come back on the next call and say, so how did the drinking go? How much water did you drink per day? And how much breathing exercises did you do? Good for you. Well, I only did 5 days, didn't do 7 days. Well, celebrate. You did 5 days,
Right. That's huge.
right?
Yeah.
Let's celebrate this. Don't beat yourself up.
Mhm.
Cheer yourself on.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. We gotta be our own cheerleaders.
Yeah, be your own cheerleaders. Well, I want to thank you, Ashleigh, for coming today and sharing your personal story, because your story, I'm sure that nurses out there can relate. May not be the exact same story, but
Mhm.
it's certainly relatable. And I hope for those of you out there, nurses who are listening, when I say have a happy Nurses Week, Nurses Day, it's not just about celebrating the profession. It's about celebrating you.
Mhm.
What are the things that you've done, and beating yourself up is not going to help. On the contrary, it's about saying, I'm struggling, acknowledge that I'm struggling, and I need some help. I mean, the best leaders in life are those who ask for help. They're not the ones who think they know everything and lead the way. And, we're not superheroes and super nurses with our capes on. We're
Right.
people in need as well. And if we can role model that for our communities, for our patients, for our families, for our coworkers, as you've done, Ashleigh, you've shown up, and you've shown up differently, and people have noticed.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
you're looking good. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are many nurses out there who are changing, who are stepping into nurse coaching. I did it, you know, 25 years ago, before nurse coaching was even um, a thing. I was coaching. And, just like you, actually, I was saying, well, I know I've been coaching as a nurse. I've been coaching my patients. I've been, but whoa, when you step into the profession and you really
Right.
work with a nurse coach, it's very different.
Mhm.
It's not just guiding people or helping them. It's bigger. It's
Mhm.
much bigger than that. And it changes your whole life.
Mhm.
It changes your whole life, one step at a time. And when you can compare, like, I've got clients I've been working with for a year, 2 years, or whatever, some longer term patient clients, and they say, am I moving forward? And I go, where were you 2 years ago? Where were you a year ago? Where were you 6 months ago? Like, and they're like, wow. And it's really interesting because I give them a scale of 0 to 10. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And they say, well, I'm a 4 now, and I want to be, a 10. So I say, what's your 10? So they describe their 10. And then I go back, a year later, and say, okay, where are you now? Well, I'm a 5, but how come I only moved 1? And I go, well, what's your 10? Their 10 is totally different.
Mhm. Is it?
They've changed their 10.
Uh-huh.
So of course you might still be at the same number, but that's because you're comparing it to something
Something
bigger now. You're
different.
playing a
Mhm.
much bigger game. Your life
Mhm.
has expanded.
Mhm.
It's fabulous to see. I mean, If
Yeah.
anything, and you know, Ashley, I think you can share this. It's to be part of somebody else's life. That's a privilege for us.
Hmm.
That's an honor. I don't take it lightly. It's
Right.
it's fabulous to watch somebody grow
Hmm.
and to be part of that.
Yes.
It's pretty simple.
Hmm.
Any closing thoughts for our nurses today?
Well, I will say I feel like that as nurses that we're all wounded healers,
Mm,
and that we have so
wow.
much capacity to change another human, like you were saying, and that we
Yeah.
can do that, one step at a time.
Wow.
And it requires just being in the moment with someone and not
Mm.
missing that.
You know, if we were off this call, and even though we're on this call, I kind of have a sense of reaching out to you, Ashley, and say, do we need to write this book called The Wounded Healer?
Yeah.
You know, at one point I wanted to write one that said, you know, healing the healers,
Uh-huh.
but I kind of love the wounded healer. There's
Yeah.
something very rich about that. Maybe it's an
Hmm.
article. Maybe we
Could
can
be.
co-write that. I don't know. Anyway,
Hmm. It's a good
a
thought.
thought, but again, so honored to have you today sharing your story. I hope this reaches a lot of nurses out there. Listen, ask questions. Ashley, maybe you can, in the comments when this is done, just throw in your contact information that somebody can reach
Sure.
you.
Hmm.
Of course, people know how to reach me. They're here on the live, so they know how to do that. But really, you know, reach out, ask us the questions, ask us how we can help you. It's important. You know, let's look at what's below the water surface of your
Hmm.
iceberg,
Hmm.
and let's help heal the wounded together.
That's right. Let's
All
do
right.
it.
Well, thanks
Thank
so much,
you. This
Ashley.
this was a privilege to be here with you, so I really am honored as
Yeah,
well. Hmm.
yeah, so great. And see you at the Nurses Transforming Healthcare calls.
Yes.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
I will be there.
That's another thing. We did a live call yesterday, so if you haven't seen it, check it out on my live stream. All right. Take
All
care,
right.
Ashley.
Thank you. You too.
Take
Bye,
care. Bye bye.
Lillian.